3 years I was his secret, his strategy, his revenge against my brother. But on the night he planned to humiliate me, I vanished. No fights. No tears. Just silence. When I returned, I was wearing the ring of the one man he feared most. And this time I wasn't playing his game. I was ending it. They say secrets lose their power the moment they're spoken aloud. But I'd held mine close for 3 years and its power had only grown, quietly like a vine coiling around my ribs. His name was Connor Hayes. And no one knew we were together. Not Liam, my older brother, who would have sooner driven his car into a tree than let me near Connor. Not Jenna, my best friend and roommate, who often asked why I never dated, her voice laced with concern. Not even the man himself seemed to fully understand how much power he held over me. We met by accident. It was a summer fundraiser. One of those high society functions my brother dragged me to because networking is survival. Liam was a sharp lawyer and an even sharper brother, always watching over me like I was the last line of his family's legacy. He meant well, but that night I needed space. The rooftop terrace was my escape. Cool air, fewer eyes, less noise. And then he appeared. Leaning against the balcony, glass of bourbon in hand, dressed in a dark navy suit that fit too perfectly for it to be coincidence. Trying to disappear? He asked without looking at me. I should have walked away. Liam had warned me about him since college. Told me Connor was bad news wrapped in good looks and expensive cologne. But I didn't walk away. I stayed. I laughed at his dry jokes. And when he offered me a ride home, I said yes. That was the first of many secrets. Over the next few months I found myself falling. It started slowly, coffee dates in out-of-the-way cafes, long conversations in parked cars, stolen moments after charity events. He made me feel seen, something no one had done in a long time. With Connor, I didn't have to be Liam Carter's little sister. I could just be Ellie. But there was always a wall. He never took me to his apartment. Never introduced me to his friends. Never let me tag him in a photo. At first, I thought he was protecting me from the public eye, from the political world he lived in. But as the months turned into years, that explanation wore thin. Till I stayed. I told myself love was about patience. The lies we tell ourselves are the cruelest kind. It was a Monday in October when I realized something was off. I had just returned home from my gallery job, my hands still smudged with charcoal. Jenna was baking something, banana bread I think, while music drifted through our small apartment. My phone lit up. Connor. Sorry, can't make it tonight. Something came up. That was the third cancellation that week. I didn't even reply. Instead, I stood there in the kitchen staring at the message like it held answers. It didn't. All it gave me was a hollow ache in my chest that I'd grown too familiar with. You okay? Jenna asked, looking over her shoulder, flour dusting her cheek. Yeah, I lied. Just tired. She gave me a look. One of those best friend scans that tried to see past the surface, but didn't push. I went to my room, closed the door and let the silence settle over me. The next few weeks passed in a blur of denial. Connor would show up with roses the day after canceling plans, claiming late meetings, emergency calls, or his father dragging him into campaign chaos. He'd kiss my forehead and call me sweetheart, in that low, soothing voice that always made me forgive too easily. And I always forgave him. Because I didn't want to admit what I already knew. It all came to a head the week of my birthday. I didn't want a party, but Liam insisted. 25 is a milestone, he declared, already texting caterers before I could object. It was to be held at the Fairmont Hotel's ballroom. Polished floors, grand chandeliers, a guest list filled with names I didn't care to remember. Connor said he'd be out of town that day for a last-minute trip to DC. I pretended to believe him. 2 days before the party, I stopped by his office unannounced. The receptionist looked startled to see me. Mr. Hayes isn't expecting visitors today, she said, checking her screen. That's okay, I replied with a polite smile. It's just a surprise. She hesitated but finally nodded. He's in the conference room. Second door on the right. I walked in on laughter. Connor sat at the head of a sleek glass table, flanked by 2 men and a woman I didn't recognize. They were laughing, deep, boisterous, unguarded. I paused at the door unseen. One of the men leaned forward, grinning. You're really going to pull it off? Connor raised his bourbon. On her birthday, no less. It's poetic, really. My chest tightened. The woman raised an eyebrow. You sure you want to go through with it? She was never the point, Connor said, smirking. It was always about Liam. I just had to hit him where it hurt. Being with his sister was strategic. The words sliced through me like glass. And she never suspected? One asked. She's sweet, Connor chuckled. Naive. I almost feel bad. Almost. That was when I backed away, slowly, quietly, like a ghost retreating from the living. I didn't cry in the elevator. I didn't cry in the Uber. I didn't cry when I unlocked the apartment door and collapsed onto the couch. I just sat there, numb. How do you grieve a relationship that never truly existed? Jenna wasn't home. And for that I was grateful. I opened my laptop, pulled out my passport and searched flights. Anywhere. Anywhere but here. Paris had always been a dream. Not for the clichés, not the romance or the croissants, but for the anonymity. A city where I could disappear and rebuild. I booked a flight for the next morning. One way. When Jenna came home I told her I needed a break. Burnout, art block, existential crisis, take your pick. She didn't pry. Just hugged me and promised to water my plants. I left a note for Liam, I love you. I just need space right now. Please don't worry. I didn't mention Connor. I didn't have the strength. At the airport I kept checking over my shoulder, half expecting him to come running, to tell me it was all a joke. That he loved me. That he never meant any of it. But he didn't come. Of course he didn't. Paris was gray and cold when I landed. The city stretched out before me like a question mark. I checked into a modest apartment in the 4th arrondissement, walked aimlessly through winding streets, and tried to forget that 3 years of my life had been built on nothing but a game. A game I never knew I was playing. The night of my birthday arrived like a storm no one saw coming. Back in New York, the Fairmont Hotel's grand ballroom glowed with crystal chandeliers and expensive champagne. The scent of roses drifted from the centerpieces Liam had insisted on. He said it would make the place smell like my childhood garden. Over 200 guests filed in, all expecting the grand appearance of the birthday girl. But I wasn't there. I was across the ocean in a Parisian cafe, sitting alone with a lukewarm espresso, watching rain tap gently against the window. Liam had called 3 times. I hadn't answered. Jenna had texted something frantic, likely trying to cover for my absence. And Connor? I expected nothing. Except I was wrong. Liam. What do you mean she's not here? Liam demanded, phone pressed to his ear as he paced near the bar. His jaw clenched with every unanswered ring. She wouldn't just skip this, he muttered. Maybe she's running late, Jenna offered weakly. But her expression was uneasy. She's been off. Quiet. Liam didn't like that. Ellie was the calm one, the one who always showed up, on time, composed, smiling. Something wasn't right. His eyes scanned the ballroom over the mingling guests, the glittering gowns and tuxedos, the camera flashes popping in intervals. Then they landed on Connor Hayes. Standing near the stage with a bourbon in hand and a smirk curling at the edge of his mouth. Liam's blood boiled. He hadn't expected her to show, truth be told. Ellie had always been trusting but not stupid. He was intuitive. That's what had made the game so exhilarating. Dangerous even. The quiet ones were always the most unpredictable. Still, he'd expected her to at least confront him. Scream. Cry. Something. But she vanished. No texts. No calls. Nothing. And that unsettled him more than he cared to admit. When he'd seen her name absent from the guest list, his first thought wasn't relief. It was confusion. Then came the flicker of dread. Maybe she found out, someone muttered beside him. Connor forced a smile. Even if she did, what's she going to do? Run to Big Brother? Liam's always wanted a reason to come after me. This'll just make it easier. But even as he said it, something gnawed at the edge of his confidence. Where was she? Ellie. I didn't open my phone until the cafe lights flickered for closing. When I finally looked, there were 17 missed calls. Liam. Jenna. Even a few unknown numbers. But the one that made me pause was from Connor. One voicemail. I didn't listen to it. I deleted it. Some part of me wanted to know what he'd say, whether it would be anger, worry, confusion, or smugness. But I didn't want to hear his voice. Not yet. Maybe not ever. Instead, I turned my focus to the invitation burning a hole in my email inbox. Theo Ashworth. I'd met him 2 days prior. He wasn't the sort of man you forget. Tall, composed, dressed in tailored charcoal gray, with eyes that saw too much and said too little. We'd been at a networking event for local artists and private investors. Theo was both. His gallery had hosted some of the biggest European art names in the last decade. I'd heard of him in passing but never expected to meet him. He noticed my name tag, Ellie Carter, New York artist, and asked why someone with my profile had come to Paris on such short notice. I gave a half-truth, needed distance. He studied me. Distance or escape? The question struck harder than I expected. I didn't answer. He didn't push. Instead, he offered his card and an invitation. I'm hosting a small engagement at my estate outside the city. You may find the company refreshing. Sounded like a test. Or a challenge. Maybe both. Now 2 days later I stared at that invitation and made my decision. The estate. It was unlike anything I'd ever seen. A sprawling 19th century villa draped in ivy, nestled on the edge of a vineyard, glowing with warm lights and hushed music. The type of place that lived in oil paintings and luxury magazines. Theo met me at the entrance. I wasn't sure you'd come, he said. I wasn't sure either, I replied honestly. He didn't ask questions. Just offered me his arm and guided me through arched doorways and into softly lit halls filled with strangers in designer suits and whispered conversations. You don't belong here, I murmured after a glass of champagne. He tilted his head. Neither do you. We found a quiet corner of the conservatory, surrounded by ancient books and orchids blooming in porcelain pots. You carry heartbreak like armor, Theo said. I raised an eyebrow. Is that a line? It's an observation, he replied. You walk like you expect someone to catch you falling, but you've already hit the ground. I didn't know what to say to that. So I told him the truth. Not all of it. Not names. Not specifics. But I told him about the man I thought I loved. The betrayal. The birthday that became an escape. Theo listened without interrupting. When I finished, he leaned forward and said quietly, "What if I told you there's a way to turn that pain into power?" I frowned. "What do you mean?" "A proposal," he said. "One that benefits us both." That night, after most guests had retired and the estate was cloaked in moonlight, Theo explained. "I need a wife," he said. I choked on my wine. "Not in the traditional sense," he clarified, amused. "There are business and family obligations tied to my inheritance. I need to present stability. A serious relationship. Preferably a marriage. You need an escape. A reinvention." I stared at him. "You want me to pretend to marry you?" "I want you to actually marry me," he said. "On paper at least. It will last as long as it needs to. You'll be protected. Connected. Free from whoever hurt you." My mouth was dry. "You don't even know me." "I know enough," Theo replied. "You're quiet, clever, emotionally intelligent, and fiercely private. You won't fall for me and I won't fall for you. That's the point." I laughed, bitter, breathless. "You say that like it's a selling point." "It is." I didn't say yes that night. But I didn't say no. Instead, I returned to my apartment, lay awake until dawn and stared at the ceiling. Connor had destroyed the version of me that believed in slow love and soft intentions. Maybe this new version of me needed something else. Something colder. Sharper. Back in New York, rumors began to swirl. She left the country without warning. She didn't even show up to her own party. Was it a breakdown? A scandal? Liam was flooded with questions. His firm tried to quiet the noise, but people noticed. He made more calls. Sent messages. None were answered. Jenna refused to give details. "Ellie's safe," was all she'd say. "She's starting over." That answer made him snap. He stared at the phone screen like it betrayed him. How dare she disappear without confrontation? Without letting him control the end of their story? "She's not the type to run," he muttered to himself. She was supposed to break. But she hadn't. She vanished. And that scared him. Because it meant she'd stopped playing by his rules. And Connor Hayes hated losing control. Paris looked different once I said yes. I hadn't realized how heavy everything had been until Theo's offer shifted the weight. It wasn't just a marriage arrangement. It was a shield. A boundary. A way to rewrite the story Connor thought he'd ended. I didn't tell anyone. Not Jenna. Not Liam. Not even the few friends I still texted from time to time. The only person I told was Theo. I said yes over breakfast, sitting across from him in the winter garden of his estate. He didn't look surprised. I had a feeling you would, he said simply, stirring his coffee without looking at me. Not because you're desperate. Because you're smart. Are you sure? I asked, suddenly hesitant. You barely know me. I know enough, he said. And I don't need more than that. He slid a folder across the table. Legal documents. Terms. Agreements. Prenup. Everything outlined and clinical, which should have made me feel like a contract. But strangely it gave me control. For the first time in weeks I didn't feel like someone's pawn. I felt like a player. Over the next few days we moved fast. Theo's assistant, Lucien, handled the legal side. A lean, efficient man with the temperament of a banker and the style of a magazine editor. He rarely smiled, but he was loyal to Theo in a way that didn't need explanation. Your engagement will be public by the end of the week, he informed me while I signed the final page. Mr. Ashworth is hosting a formal announcement dinner this Saturday. The press will attend. We'll control the leak and push the narrative. What narrative? I asked. That you were childhood friends recently reunited. A love story delayed by time and now rekindled in Paris. I blinked. That's oddly specific. Lucien looked at me over the rim of his glasses. It sells. That Saturday the world changed. I stood beside Theo in a silk gown the color of champagne, hand resting lightly on his arm as photographers snapped photos and guests whispered behind flutes of Dom Perignon. He introduced me as his fiancée. People clapped. Some gasped. I smiled, steady and unreadable. And somewhere across the Atlantic I knew Connor Hayes was watching the headlines. Connor, New York. He stared at the headline on his phone like it had been written in a foreign language. Ashworth heir engaged in surprise Paris announcement. Meet his mysterious fiancée Eleanor Carter. His hand tightened around the glass he was holding. Carter? Aubrey asked behind him, walking into the room. Liam Carter's sister. Connor didn't answer. He zoomed in on the photo. Ellie looked stunning. Composed. Every inch the elegant socialite she'd never once tried to be back in New York. And she was standing beside Theo Ashworth. Of all people. The youngest billionaire in the Ashworth family empire. Private. Ruthless in business and allergic to scandal. The kind of man who only did things with a purpose. This wasn't a coincidence. Connor felt his pulse spike. She wasn't hiding. She was announcing her reinvention in the loudest way possible. And she was doing it beside someone who had the power to ruin men like him. Theo Paris. She handled herself well, Lucien said, checking the final media report. She always does, Theo replied. They stood in the study after the event, the air still tinged with perfume and champagne. Do you think she knows what she's stepping into? Lucien asked. Theo glanced toward the closed doors, where Ellie was likely slipping out of her heels and wiping off the makeup that masked the woman beneath. She's learning, he said. Faster than most. Ellie. I took a long bath that night, watching my reflection shimmer beneath the surface of the water. My engagement ring sparkled on my left hand, too large and too perfect to ever be real, but it was mine now. My thoughts drifted to New York. To Liam. To Jenna. To everything I hadn't said. I knew the texts would come. The calls. The concern. But I wasn't ready to face them yet. I wasn't ready to explain how I'd gone from heartbreak to headline in 2 weeks. I needed space. And I needed revenge. But not the impulsive kind. Not the screaming, crying kind that ends in regret and empty victories. I wanted the kind of revenge that came dressed in silk and served on silver platters. The next morning I woke to chaos. My phone was full. Messages from Liam, Jenna, even my old boss at the gallery. Liam, Ellie, what is going on? You're engaged? To Theo Ashworth? Call me. No. Jenna, tell me this is a publicity stunt. I swear I will fly to Paris. Liam, again, is this why you left? Was this already happening? Ellie, I need answers. I didn't respond. Instead, I got dressed and met Theo in the courtyard. You're trending, he said without looking up from his tablet. I nodded. Liam's panicking. Let him. He handed me a cappuccino. When you're ready, we'll fly to New York. I froze. What? You'll need to face him eventually, Theo said. Your brother. Your past. Your ex. My grip tightened on the porcelain cup. You want me to parade this engagement in front of Connor Hayes? Theo looked up, his expression unreadable. I want you to choose when and how you let him realize what he lost. I thought about that all day. About how Connor would react seeing me on Theo's arm. About how Liam would feel betrayed. About how Jenna might cry, might yell, might call me crazy. But what kept me up at night wasn't any of that. It was the fear that Connor would look at me and still see weakness. And that I couldn't allow. Connor. Days later. He watched the Paris interviews with muted disbelief. Ellie was everywhere. Graceful. Poised. Speaking in soft, articulate tones about the surprise reunion with Theo, how they had always had a quiet bond even when life pulled them apart. It was so carefully constructed, so believable, that even he almost forgot she wasn't the same girl he used to manipulate with a smile and a half-hearted apology. And then there was Theo. Standing behind her like a silent fortress, answering none of the questions directed at him, only stepping in when a reporter asked about her past. What about her connection to the Carter family? Isn't her brother irrelevant? Theo said flatly. She's in Ashworth now. Connor nearly dropped the remote. The statement echoed like a warning. Jenna, New York. Are you seriously going to let her get married without even talking to her? Jenna hissed, storming into Liam's office. She's not responding, Liam said, rubbing his temples. And clearly she doesn't want us involved. She vanished. And now she's suddenly marrying the most powerful man in Europe. She's smart, Liam muttered. She's doing something. I just don't know what. Jenna folded her arms. She's doing something all right. And if she's anything like you, it's probably a long game. Liam looked at her, a flicker of alarm in his eyes. And for the first time he realized his sister might not need rescuing. He might be preparing to strike. A week later I agreed to return to New York. Not to reconcile. To begin. Theo booked the jet. Lucien handled the press. And I, Ellie Carter, packed the most expensive wardrobe I'd ever owned and rehearsed my lines in the mirror. I wasn't coming back as the girl who'd been used. I was coming back as the woman who'd rebuilt herself brick by unbreakable brick. And if Connor thought the story ended with him, he hadn't read the final chapter. The private jet touched down at JFK under a moody stretch of gray clouds. I watched the skyline drift closer through the window, familiar, sharp, and somehow colder than I remembered. Theo sat across from me, reading over a file with his usual quiet focus. His tie was slightly loosened, jacket draped over the seat beside him, but nothing about his demeanor ever seemed unprepared. Still time to back out, he said without looking up. I smirked. We're a little past that, don't you think? He glanced up, studying my expression. This won't be easy. Not with your brother. Not with Hayes. I'm not here for easy, I said softly. I'm here for clarity. Rival. Lucien had arranged a black car to take us directly to Theo's penthouse in Manhattan. Discreet entrance, private elevator, no press. Not yet. I scheduled an interview for tomorrow, Lucien informed us as we rode up. One exclusive appearance on the Conrad show. It'll hit the right demographic, wealthy, influential, scandal-curious. Lovely, I muttered. Theo raised an eyebrow. You'll be fine. They'll ask the obvious questions. Just keep your story straight. I nodded, but my mind was already elsewhere. Liam. Jenna. Connor. This city held more ghosts than memories. Jenna. I hadn't told her I was back. Not yet. But I didn't have to. She was waiting outside the Ashworth Tower before we even finished unpacking. Holy hell, she breathed when I stepped out of the car. It's really you. I froze for a second, then let her pull me into a hug. He squeezed too tight. Smelled like lavender and burnt coffee. You look like Vogue ate you alive and spit you out richer. Charming as ever, I said, my voice catching. She pulled back, eyes glassy. What the hell happened, Ellie? I'll explain. Just, not yet. Are you okay? I hesitated. I think I'm becoming okay. The next day, the Conrad show. I wore a tailored ivory dress and a pearl necklace Theo had picked out. Something classic, unshakable, bridal but not romantic. We were seated side by side, facing the polished, gold-haired host who smiled like she already knew what she'd ask. Ellie, she began, this announcement shocked a lot of people. Just a few months ago you were working in an art gallery, quietly living in Brooklyn. And now, you're engaged to one of the most elusive billionaires in Europe. Can you walk us through how this happened? I smiled, polite and distant. Theo and I met years ago through family circles. We lost touch. Life happened. And then by chance I ended up in Paris. We reconnected. Something clicked. And it didn't matter that you lived in different countries, came from different worlds? Sometimes the right person shows up in the wrong chapter, I said softly. You just rewrite the story. The host turned to Theo. And you, Mr. Ashworth? Why now? I don't believe in perfect timing, Theo replied. But I believe in decisive moments. And Ellie, she's someone you make decisions for. His hand found mine. I didn't flinch. The interview aired that evening. Within hours it trended. People didn't just watch, they dissected. Tabloids speculated. Business journals analyzed the merger of two powerful families. Gossip forums compared my wardrobe to old money standards. But one headline stood out. Liam Carter's sister engaged to Ashworth. Political circles stunned. And with it came the inevitable storm. Liam. He showed up at the Ashworth building the next morning. Theo and I were in the middle of a call when Lucien knocked and announced, Mr. Carter is downstairs. He insists on seeing Eleanor. Alone. I felt the breath rush out of my lungs. Theo looked at me. Do you want to? I nodded. Yes. Alone. Theo didn't argue. Just stood, adjusted his cuffs and left the room. Liam, confrontation. He looked the same, imposing, sharp-suited, that protective storm brewing in his eyes. Are you out of your mind? He said the moment the door shut. Do you even know who you're marrying? Yes, I said calmly. Do you? This isn't you, Ellie. Pure fantasy. The interview's the billionaire fiancé. You don't do this. You mean I don't take control? I challenged. I don't make choices without your permission? He flinched. That's not what I meant. I stepped closer. Then what did you mean? That I should have let Connor humiliate me? That I should have come running to you with the pieces? His eyes widened. You knew. Of course I knew. He swallowed hard. And this marriage, it's retaliation. No, I said quietly. This is recovery. He stared at me for a long moment. Then, I'll protect you. No matter what. I softened. I know, Liam. But this time I'm protecting myself. The video of the interview played on loop in his office. Every word chipped away at the image of the Ellie he remembered. This version wasn't soft. Wasn't small. She wasn't the quiet girl who forgave easily or waited by the phone. She had risen, flawless, calculated, and completely unreachable. And Theo Ashworth? He wasn't a placeholder. He was a threat. A man who didn't flinch. Who held Ellie's hand like she belonged in his world. Connor closed the laptop and stood pacing. He didn't know what unsettled him more. That she had moved on. Or that she looked better for it. Later that week, a charity gala. It was Lucien's idea. Returning to your old social circles will complete the illusion, he said. It's not an illusion, Theo corrected. It's a strategy. The gala was a fundraiser for medical scholarships. Exactly the kind of public event both the Carter family and the Ashworths would be expected to attend. Theo and I entered through the main doors, camera flashes blinding. The room hushed for a beat as heads turned. And then the whisper started. Is that Eleanor Carter? With Theo Ashworth? She looks transformed. I clung to Theo's arm, my smile easy but rehearsed. And then I saw him. Connor. Cross the room. He froze when our eyes met. I didn't blink. He made his way toward us slowly as if unsure whether he was dreaming. Ellie, he said when he reached us, voice quieter than I remembered. Connor. I nodded politely as if greeting an old colleague, not the man who'd planned to destroy me. Theo's hand tightened around mine. I was surprised, Connor said, glancing between us. You and Theo. It's sudden. Not really, I said with a soft shrug. Some things just fall into place. His jaw clenched. We should talk. Alone. That won't be necessary, Theo said, stepping forward slightly. We're quite busy tonight. Connor ignored him. Ellie. I'm happy, Connor, I said, voice even. Genuinely. He looked at me like he didn't believe it. But that wasn't my problem anymore. That night I stood on the balcony of Theo's penthouse, watching the city glitter below. You were remarkable, he said, handing me a glass of wine. I didn't feel remarkable, I murmured. Not everything feels like power when you're using it, Theo said. Sometimes it feels like survival. I looked at him. And for a moment I saw something in his expression. Respect, admiration, and something softer he didn't name. "Why are you really helping me?" I asked. He sipped his wine. "Because when people like Connor break something good, someone has to show them it won't stay broken. If there's one thing the Ashworths do flawlessly, it's control. Every event is timed to the second. Every guest list vetted, every floral arrangement symmetrical, every bottle of wine decanted exactly 30 minutes before it's served. So when someone uninvited appears, it isn't just an inconvenience. It's an insult." The night was meant to celebrate Theo's sister Vivian and her foundation's 5th anniversary. A glittering rooftop affair atop the Ashworth building, overlooking the Manhattan skyline. Theo and I arrived fashionably late, our entrance synchronized to the music's swell and the media's clicking cameras. I wore black. Not out of mourning but as armor. He wore navy silk, his cufflinks custom engraved. To the world we were perfection. But I should have known Connor wouldn't stay quiet. Earlier that day, Theo was reviewing last-minute security notes while I sipped coffee in his kitchen. "You're tense," I observed. "I don't like surprises," he muttered, skimming a printed guest list. "Neither do I said. Lucien stepped into the room, expression unreadable as always. "There's been a request to add Connor Hayes to tonight's guest list." My hand froze mid-air. Theo looked up slowly. "Denied." "Already done," Lucien replied. "But I thought you should know." "He'll find another way in," I said, a knot forming in my stomach. Theo leaned back in his chair. "Let him. If he wants a scene, he'll get one." Vivian was radiant in sapphire velvet, speaking to reporters about the importance of equitable health care. Guests circulated, champagne flowed, and a string quartet played an instrumental cover of Bittersweet Symphony. Everything was perfect. Until it wasn't. I saw him before anyone else did. Connor. He didn't sneak in. He strode through the elevator entrance like he belonged, like he still owned the right to stand near me. Worse, he wore the same cologne. The scent hit before the sound of his voice did. "Ellie." I turned, heart thudding against my ribs. Theo appeared at my side instantly, voice like ice. "Leave." "I just want to talk," Connor said, lifting his hands. "Not here. Just 5 minutes." "You're not on the guest list," Theo replied coldly. Connor's eyes didn't leave mine. "Ellie, please." People were starting to notice. Conversations paused. Heads tilted. Vivian's eyes narrowed from across the terrace. "I'll speak to him," I said, my voice low. Theo's jaw clenched. "You don't have to." "I want to," I said. Then softer, "Trust me." Theo hesitated, then stepped aside. We found a quieter corner of the terrace garden, just beyond the marble balustrade. Strings of fairy lights illuminated Connor's face, casting harsh shadows over the same features that once made me feel safe. Now I saw every lie etched in the angles of his expression. "You're really going through with this?" he asked, voice hoarse. I blinked. "Going through with what, Connor?" He looked frustrated. "Marrying him. Becoming this version of you." I tilted my head. "You mean the version that doesn't cry over men who use her?" He flinched. "You were never supposed to find out," he muttered. "And yet I did. It wasn't personal." "Don't say that," I snapped. "Don't you dare reduce 3 years of my life to strategy." His lips parted, but I wasn't done. "I gave you my trust, my loyalty, and you played me like a chess piece because you hated my brother." His voice cracked. "Oh, she's your ex. And whatever happened between you and Liam should have stayed between you and Liam. You didn't need to drag me into it." "I didn't mean to hurt you," he said, quieter now. "But after you left, everything went to hell. I kept waiting for you to call." "I did call," I said. "I called you out. And you didn't show up." He stepped forward. "You can't tell me you actually love him." "I don't have to," I replied. "But he respects me. That's more than you ever did." Theo watching. From a distance, Theo watched the exchange. He didn't move, didn't interfere, but his posture shifted slightly, the hand in his pocket curling into a fist, the line of his jaw tightening. Lucien approached him. "Want me to remove him?" Theo shook his head. "She needs this." Back at the garden, Connor reached into his jacket and pulled out something small. A photograph. From years ago. One of the few I didn't delete. "I kept it," he said. I wasn't always lying, Ellie. Not at the end. I took the photo, stared at it, and then slowly I tore it in half. You don't get to keep parts of me, I said. Connor looked gutted. I turned and walked away. Back in the main party, Vivian cornered me beside the dessert table. Well, she said, sipping her wine, that was spicy. I gave her a look. Don't start. Oh, come on. You eviscerated him with so much poise I wanted to send you flowers. I cracked a smile. He shouldn't have come. Vivian leaned in, her tone dropping. He's going to try again. Men like him don't like losing. He already lost. She smirked. Then make sure he never forgets it. Theo was quiet in the car. I waited for the inevitable commentary, but it didn't come. You mad? Asked finally. He glanced at me. No. I exhaled. I'm impressed, he said. I turned to him. You are. You didn't just stand your ground. You rewrote the script while he was still trying to read the last scene. A silence settled between us, warm and charged. I'm not the same girl who loved him, I said. I know, Theo replied. That's why this works. Later that night, I lay in bed staring at the ceiling, the city buzzing beneath the windows. The photo he'd handed me sat shredded in the trash. 3 years reduced to paper and ink. And still some tiny part of me mourned. Not for him. For the version of myself that didn't know better. But now I did. And tomorrow we would begin phase 2. There's a strange thing that happens when you stop apologizing for your power. People start watching you more closely. Waiting to see if you'll misuse it or worse, own it. By the end of our second week in New York, the Ashworth name had opened doors I never knew existed. Invitations to galas, boardrooms, charity luncheons. Influential women began pulling me aside, not out of curiosity, but recognition. And slowly, so carefully it felt like strategy, Theo stepped back and let me lead. You're becoming someone people ask permission from, he said one morning over espresso, reading yet another press article about us. Good, I replied. I'm done asking. Lucien's calendar was relentless. Appearances at the Metropolitan Board, a charity auction with the Whitmores, a dinner with the Mayfair Trust. Each event was another opportunity to shift the narrative from Connor's ex to Theo Ashworth's future wife. At one of the art galas, someone introduced me to Amelia Chin, a renowned investor with ties to half the city's startups. You handled that interview like you were born in front of cameras, she told me as she swirled wine in a crystal glass. I wasn't, I said. I just got tired of letting someone else write my story. Her smile was sharp. Then you'll go far. Behind the scenes, Theo was already working. He never told me everything, but I saw the signs. Connor's company, Hayes Consulting, started missing meetings. A few key contracts vanished overnight. Rumors swirled about an SEC investigation into improper lobbying. I hadn't asked Theo to destroy him. But he knew I didn't want him spared either. Lucien placed a file on the table. 3 of his largest backers have pulled out. The 4th will follow if we move the tech deal to the Voss Group. Theo flipped the page. Done. Lucien hesitated. You're doing this for her? I'm doing this because men like Hayes think they can play games without consequences, Theo said, voice low. But more importantly, because she won't ask me to. Lucien nodded. And when he falls? Theo looked out the window. He'll realize she was the only real thing he ever had. I didn't know every move Theo made, but I started noticing the ripples. An article appeared in the Tribune titled, Cracks in the Empire, Hayes Consulting Faces Financial Pressure. I read it twice, then looked at Theo. You. He didn't look up from his tablet. Me. You're doing this for me? I'm doing this for the version of you who still blamed herself the night you left New York. I went quiet for a long moment. Then softly, that version doesn't exist anymore. I know, he said. But Connor doesn't. My brother wasn't stupid. He'd watched my transformation with the unease of someone who knew I'd become something stronger and colder. This man you're marrying, Liam said over lunch at the Mercer, he's not doing all this for show. He's clearing Connor off the chessboard. I didn't deny it. Liam leaned forward. Be careful. If you let Theo fight this for you, people will forget you're capable of fighting for yourself. I smiled. Let them forget. I'm not fighting to be remembered, I'm fighting to be free. He sat in his office, jaw tight, phone on speaker as his CFO spoke rapidly. We lost the Vexler account this morning. And the Zurich bid is stalling. Connor slammed his fist on the desk. Why? Because someone's pulling strings, Hayes. And whoever it is, they're better connected than you. The call ended. He looked at the stack of papers. Headlines. Declines. Warnings. And then he looked at the photograph he thought he'd thrown away months ago. Another copy buried in a drawer. Ellie. Her smile soft. Her eyes trusting. He felt sick. He reached for his phone. It rang once before I picked up. Ellie. My voice was calm. Connor. I need to see you. No. Just 5 minutes. That's all I'm asking. I already gave you that, I said. You used it to lie. Pause. Everything's falling apart, he admitted. I know. You're doing this. I'm not, I said honestly. But I also didn't stop it. You're not like this, he said almost to himself. You never knew me, I said, then hung up. I felt no guilt. Only closure. Theo poured bourbon and handed me a glass. Hayes will be out of liquidity by month's end. If he doesn't sell, he folds. I took a sip. And if he does? He sells to us. I stared at him. You'd buy the company of the man who tried to use me? Theo's mouth curved slightly. Only so I can burn it down from the inside. I laughed for the first time in days. You're terrifying, I said. He leaned in. Only when necessary. The next morning I received a letter. Handwritten. No name, just initials. Sich. I opened it slowly. Ellie. I know I don't deserve a reply, but I need you to know, you were never just a strategy. Somewhere along the way I started believing in the lie I built around you, and when you left, it broke something in me I didn't know I still had. I see you now. Not as Liam's sister. Not as someone to use. But as the woman who became everything I couldn't be. I lost. And maybe I always deserved to. Connor. I folded it in half and placed it in the drawer. Not to forget. But to remind myself why I'd never go back. Later that week, Vivian joined me for brunch at a hidden rooftop cafe. She wore red like a warning sign. You're making enemies, she said after the first mimosa. Important ones. Let them line up, I said. She smiled. Good. Because the Ashworth name doesn't come with protection. Comes with attention. And some of that is toxic. I nodded. Then I'll learn to filter. Vivian studied me. I like you. But don't get too comfortable. Love doesn't always look like power plays and rings. I met her gaze. This isn't love. She leaned in. Then what will you do if it turns into it? I had no answer. Not yet. That night I passed Theo's office and saw him staring out the window, scotch in hand, jaw tense. I stepped in quietly. You okay? He nodded once. I walked closer. You're thinking about her. He looked at me. Her. Whoever taught you to stay distant. He didn't reply for a moment. Then, she's not worth remembering. I reached out. Touched his hand. You are. He looked at me, really looked at me. And something shifted in the silence between us. Not love. Not yet. But the beginning of something that would never be fake again. The moment you realize you've lost something irreplaceable isn't a grand, cinematic moment. It's quiet. Pathetic even. And it never happens all at once. It drips into you slowly, a truth you try to deny until it becomes undeniable. That was where Connor Hayes now lived. In denial turned reality. Connor, 1 month later. His office was nearly empty. The leather chairs had been repossessed. The secretary quit. Even the company name on the glass door had been peeled off, letter by letter, like a wound being unstitched. The empire he built had fallen, not in fire but in silence. Vendors pulled contracts. Clients ghosted. Investors fled like rats from a sinking ship. All without a trace of scandal. No headlines. No exposé. Just pressure. Elegant, invisible pressure. The kind that came from a name more powerful than his. He knew who was behind it. But Theo Ashworth never needed to speak to make a point. Meanwhile, my life was strangely quiet. The noise of public attention had dulled to a hum. My mornings began with gallery meetings or brunches with women who now looked at me as one of their own. My afternoons were filled with press calls from nonprofits wanting me to grace their boards. And in the evenings, Theo and I shared wine, strategy, and moments that increasingly felt like something more than the arrangement we signed. But part of me still waited for the final blow, for Connor's last move. And it came on a Tuesday. I was painting in the sunroom, something abstract, full of golds and deep reds, when the intercom buzzed. Lucien's voice crackled. There's someone at the lobby entrance. He won't leave. Name's Hayes. I froze. Theo wasn't home. He was at the Ashworth Foundation's quarterly board. Do you want me to call security? Lucien asked. I thought about it, then said, let him up. He looked nothing like the man I once loved. Disheveled. Hollow-eyed. The polish gone. But the arrogance, that stubborn flame in his gaze, was still flickering. Ellie, he breathed as the elevator doors opened. I stood in the center of the living room, arms folded. I had to see you, he said. One last time. You shouldn't be here, I replied calmly. I don't care. He stepped forward holding something out. A velvet box. Inside was the engagement ring he once said he couldn't afford. I bought this months ago, before everything fell apart. I didn't move. He opened it slowly. I was going to propose. When? I asked. Before or after the humiliation? His throat worked as he swallowed. I made a mistake. No, Connor. A mistake is forgetting a birthday. You made a decision. I thought I could get away with it, he whispered. I thought you'd stay. Forgive me. I didn't think you'd actually walk away. And that's the problem, I said. You never saw me as someone who could leave you. He knelt. There was no crowd. No music. No cameras. Just desperation. Marry me, he said. I'll give it all back. I'll rebuild. We can be something real. I stared at him. Then slowly I knelt too until we were eye level. And I whispered, you never knew what real was. I closed the box gently and handed it back. Don't mistake regret for love. He choked on a sound, half a laugh, half a sob. And then he broke. He didn't cry loudly. It was worse. Silent tears, shame-filled, angry at himself for caring too late. I lost you, he said. You never had me, I replied. And I stood, leaving him on the floor of the penthouse. Lucien escorted him out. Without a word. He found me on the balcony, wind tugging at the edges of my robe, the city glowing below. You okay? He asked. I nodded. He came. Theo didn't look surprised. Did you let him speak? I did. Did it help? I thought about it. Yes, I said. It helped me bury something that's been dying for a long time. He stepped closer, brushing a strand of hair from my cheek. You looked colder before, he said. When we met. Now you just look clear. I turned to him. What if I told you I'm done pretending? He held my gaze. Pretending what? That this marriage is just a deal. The silence between us stretched, thick and charged. Then Theo said softly, then maybe it's time we stopped calling it that. Hayes Consulting sold for pennies on the dollar. Sources say Ashworth Group bought the remaining assets. I didn't even blink. Theo placed the paper on the table beside my teacup like it was a love letter. I looked up at him. It's over. No, he said. It's just beginning. He watched the press conference from his apartment. Bare now. No art. No furniture worth keeping. He watched me beside Theo accepting a grant in my name for women in the arts. I didn't wear the dress he used to love. I didn't smile the way I used to around him. I belonged somewhere else now. And he knew it. He placed the engagement ring back in the box. And this time he didn't open it again. Weeks later I visited my old gallery. The owner, Marjorie, hugged me like I was someone who'd survived a war. You look grown, she said, eyes misting. I feel it, I replied. She walked me through the halls, now lined with works from other women, quiet, daring, messy. I'd like to curate a new wing, I said. One for forgotten voices. She smiled. With your name. No, I said. With my mother's. I came home to Theo in the kitchen, sleeves rolled up, hands dusted with flour. Are you baking? He shrugged. Vivian said it might win me points. I laughed. And for the first time in what felt like years, it wasn't a guarded laugh. It was real. So when he crossed the kitchen, kissed me slowly and said, let's make this real, I didn't flinch. I whispered back, it already is. We didn't plan a wedding. Not in the traditional sense. No ivory invitations. No flower girls. No orchestra rehearsals or calligraphed seating charts. There was no need to prove anything to anyone anymore. Theo and I had already stood in front of the world as something imagined. Now we wanted something real. Something ours. 3 months later. We married in the garden behind the Ashworth estate in France, just as the lavender was beginning to bloom. Vivian officiated, barefoot and slightly tipsy. Jenna cried so hard she smudged her mascara halfway through the vows. Liam grumbled about being underdressed and over-emotional, then pulled me into the longest hug I think he's ever given. Theo didn't promise me a fairy tale. He promised me respect, safety, a home, and I promised him truth. The raw, beautiful kind. I never thought I'd trust love again, I whispered. He didn't smile. He just said, then I'll earn it. The morning after. We didn't honeymoon on an island. Instead we stayed in the French countryside. I painted barefoot in the sunroom while Theo read beside the fireplace. Some days we spoke only in glances, in soft touches, in shared silence that felt louder than words. And when we did speak we talked about everything. His mother's illness, my guilt over staying with Connor so long, the weight of our names and the freedom we found in each other. There were no secrets. Not anymore. Meanwhile, Connor. He heard about the wedding on a blog. A friend texted him the photo. Ellie in a cream slip dress, wildflowers in her hair, her hands in Theo's. She looked happy. Not rich. Not strategic. Just a whole. He stared at the screen long after the message faded. There were no more calls. No letters. No desperate visits. Only silence. And in that silence he finally understood. He hadn't lost a game. He had never been a player. 1 year later. The gallery I'd dreamt of, the Marin Project named after my mother, opened in Soho. Women from all over submitted their work. Bold, chaotic, beautiful things that didn't apologize for taking up space. Theo came to every show. Not as a patron. As my partner. He'd linger by the installations, hands tucked in his pockets, watching me instead of the art. I like seeing you here, he'd say. This is who you were always meant to be. He wasn't cold anymore. Still quiet, still reserved, but warmer. He smiled more. Laughed, sometimes at his own jokes. Learned how to make coffee without Lucien's help. Called my brother just to argue about sports. One night I found him flipping through our prenup. He caught my eye and said, "Should we finally tear this up?" I grinned. "Only if you're sure I'm not going to run." He didn't hesitate. "Even if you did, I'd follow." So we burned it. Together. I no longer introduce myself as Liam Carter's sister. I no longer flinch at the name Connor Hayes. I no longer believe that love must hurt to be real. Instead, I wear my story like armor laced with lace. I stand taller. Laugh louder. Sleep better. And every now and then I wake up beside Theo and think, this is what survival looks like when it becomes living. The air was soft that evening. A golden haze over the vineyard. Theo and I stood barefoot in the grass, sipping wine, watching the sun sink. "I used to think I'd always belonged to someone else's world," I said. "You built your own," he replied. I turned to him. "Thank you. For every step you let me take alone. For never asking me to shrink." He pressed a kiss to my temple. "You would have burned anyone who tried." I laughed. "Maybe." "No maybe," he said, pulling me closer. "You were never a pawn, Ellie. You were always the queen." The